Good afternoon, Corky here, way down Alabama. Um, Not way down Alabama, northwest Alabama, but way down in the south, deep south. So when you're deep south, then the things you talk about and your theories and your things on YouTube, they're deep, deep. I'm out here with the birds. We got a lot of hummingbirds coming in and out. This year they're real bold, so you may hear them humming, coming here. They've been here all day, and as a rule, they don't avoid me like the other years they did. They're real bold this year. I'm located here, if you care. I'm located like 40 minutes from Tupelo, Mississippi, northwest Alabama, 3 hours from Memphis, I guess. Basically 2 or 3 hours to Memphis. Birmingham is like hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever it is. Most of Shoals like 45 minutes away. So I'm in the south, and so when we're talking Highway 41, we're talking about the south. And today I'm supposed to talk about Macon, Georgia. So I'm born in Atlanta, Georgia, the same year as Godzilla. I do an impression of Godzilla's atomic breath. I just did it for my 2 grandsons that are spending the night here. You probably don't want to hear that. Being born in Atlanta, Macon is just, 30, 40 minutes south, 45 minutes south of Atlanta. So the larger topic that I'm talking about is travel. But particularly today, I want to talk about what it means to be grounded as a person. So, we're born into this world on a piece of real estate. And even though we don't know it, everything that's happened in history on that land, there's a residual kind of attitude that stays in that ground, and it transforms you. So what another large category that I'm talking about is spiritual geography. And when I use that term, that's a term that's used by some Christian people, but it's used more among the indigenous populations of the world. And it were Native Americans that really taught me about spiritual geography. I've done videos on here about mountain spirituality, so if you don't know about that, you might want to learn about it. It's not necessarily a new age idea. It's just true, and people recognize it and talk about it. I just showed the Muscle Shoals documentary to my middle school class, and in that, Stevie Winwood, founder of Traffic, Blind Faith, he talks about landscape, the relationship between music and landscape, and how different landscapes yield different effects in music. This is why we have, different genres of music that evolve on different geographies or different landscapes. New Orleans has jazz. Chicago has blues. Chicago blues is different than Mississippi Delta blues. We have Newport folk music, Newport, Rhode Island. We have Laurel Canyon, California. It's a form of California singer-songwriter music that came out of Laurel Canyon. We have Nashville country music, the Nashville sound. We have Appalachian folk music, Appalachian country music, old-time music. All of these are focused in ground. We have, then internationally, we have flamenco, gypsy music that's founded or grounded in Romania. You have African drum music. A lot of it is grounded in Ghana, West Africa. We really don't think about the earth that much when we're listening to music or when we're praying. We're not really thinking about what's different about the spot where we are. But my life is, profoundly transformed by sounds. And those sounds are all grounded somewhere. If you're a Beatle fan and you can afford to go, you need to be on the front row in Liverpool at a Paul McCartney concert, as I have been, and my family. Never hear Beatle music the same way again. While I was on that front row in Liverpool at the Paul McCartney concert, Paul McCartney sang the song Maggie May. Well, those of you who own the Let It Be album, there's just, John sings maybe one or two verses of Maggie May, but there's several other verses, and it's a Liverpool pub song. Paul McCartney sang all the verses to Maggie May, and I listened to them in front of Paul McCartney, standing in Liverpool, surrounded by Liverpool football hooligans singing this pub song. I'll never hear the Beatles the same way again. Now, some of you, my dear friends that I grew up with, say almost every day, I could never live anywhere, or I don't want to ever leave this town that I'm living in, that I was raised in. And you're adverse to travel. Maybe you just can't afford travel. But there are people like that. And I have to say, in my 72nd year of my life, I've been around. I've been all through South America, all through North America. I've been to England. I haven't been a lot of places, but I've been a bunch of places. There's this old song called I Laid Around and Played Around This Old Town Too Long. Summer's almost gone, winter's coming on. Laid around and played around this old town too long, and I feel like I've got to travel on. So, I would have that. I would have that if you want to call it rambling spirit, or you want to call it whatever, I have it. And I've been asked in recent years, do you ramble? Is that what you do? But I'm not rambling without focus or without purpose. I have a goal to it. There's something, and usually it's the sounds that I hear first and I want to know where those sounds come from. So as early as fourth grade, I'm looking at 45 RPM records of artists like Clarence Carter. Slip away, all right, or Patches, I'm depending on you, son. So I'm listening to Clarence Carter, and it says it was recorded in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. Now, it took me until 6 years ago to get there. So, I was 66 years old. For 66 years, the sounds of Muscle Shoals were in my head and in my heart, and it was only, I had to get to be 66 years old before I actually went to Muscle Shoals and recorded in the studio where Clarence Carter recorded those hits. There's a transformation there. There's a truth. There is a sense of wellness that comes from being the pilgrim that follows to the the site, and there are sites that you need to go to. I served the intellectually disabled for 8 years in Cleveland, Tennessee. One man was my client, and he watched NASCAR every night. They're here. Can you hear them buzzing? They're all around me right now. They're eating. And they fight over that hummingbird feeder. And so, to be a pilgrim, to follow after to the sites. And so one of these times is when I went to Macon, Georgia. It was 1973. My friend Floyd and I left Atlanta. We were living in Atlanta at the time. Moving back to my birthplace, that was very transformative for me. It changed my life in a lot of ways. If you want to find out who you are, go back to your birthplace. It doesn't mean you're going to live there forever. It just means that there's something there for you. And there's a way of learning who you are when you're on that ground or on that mud. So it was 73. We went, it was a Sunday like today, hot Sunday, like it's a hot Sunday here in Alabama today. And we went to Macon. Well, I wanted to visit Capricorn Studios, but they were closed that day. Phil Walden, he had been Otis Redding's manager before Otis Redding got killed in a plane crash. And Phil Walden was the manager of the Allman Brothers, or the producer of the Allman Brothers. And so I wanted to go to Macon and see it. We got to Macon, went downtown. It was totally deserted, except I saw policemen's hats on the parking meters. And we finally found out that President Nixon was in town speaking at the high school stadium. So we just, wandered around Macon that day. And I think we stopped at my cousin's house in Jonesboro on the way back, maybe on the way there. In Macon, Georgia, it's not only the headquarters of Otis Redding, Richard Franklin, Little Richard, but the Allman Brothers. Now, the Allman Brothers were from Florida, but when they came to work with Phil Walden, they were in Macon, and they all lived in a big house called the Big House. Recently, I had gone back to Macon and toured the Big House and the cemetery where the Allman Brothers are buried. And, got back in touch with my Southern rock roots. And this is a big deal because, the Beatles were a huge influence in my music early on, fourth grade and onward. But when the Southern rock thing happened in the 70s, and my roots, my personal roots in Georgia, connected with the music of Southern rock, the Allman Brothers, it made a big difference in me in understanding who I was and what I was supposed to do in my life. I would also become a Christian in Atlanta in '74 in the Jesus movement, which was really mostly flowered in California, but it happened all over the world. There are a lot of these spiritual movements happen, and people get together later to compare notes, and same things happen all over the world at the same time. Well, that's the way the Jesus movement was. So that happened in Atlanta in '74. I would go back to Atlanta in '86 with my family, and we would found a church there. And so my whole spiritual identity, and not just my personal identity, not just my physical identity, but my spiritual identity is, vitally connected to Georgia and Atlanta. So when I talk about Macon, I'm talking about an extension of Atlanta to me. To illustrate what I'm describing, and if you can travel to the place, your so-called Holy Land, whatever it might be William Faulkner in Oxford, Mississippi. Is that where he's from? Or maybe you go to Carl Sandburg's house in North Carolina, or I'm going to be in September visiting, I'm told, the LBJ Ranch in Texas. So, there are these sites that are intrinsic and vital to certain ideas, certain creativities, certain historical developments. I was raised in Greensboro, North Carolina, and so that the Woolworth sit-ins during the Civil Rights Movement happened there. So for my civil rights history of the United States, that is grounded for me in Greensboro. Now I'm visiting Montgomery, Alabama, and I'm getting the new, continued experience, if you want to say it, a completion or a broadening of it. But to give you an example of this, there's a Native American scholar named Scott Momaday. You can hear him talking on things like Ken Burns' Into the West, Kevin Costner's 500 Nations. There's several documentaries about Native Americans. If you want to understand what I'm talking about here, Native Americans can always help you with it. The documentaries, especially regarding paranormal research and Bigfoot and stuff like that, they never get to the real thing that Native Americans would teach them, but they always are suspicious that they know more about it. But they end up talking about people putting curses on land and stuff, and that's just, you're going in the wrong direction there. So Scott Momaday, who's a Kiowa Indian, and he's been in the home of probably my closest Native American friend, Barry, who's a Kiowa. And so I have a knowledge about Scott Momaday that, most white people don't have as a real person. And he shares on this that his mother used to talk about when he was little, when we were at Devil's Tower. And I was talking to a man the other day, and he told me that he's a real 80s movie freak, and so on vacation he hopes to go, to where they film Goonies and stuff like that, and that's really a pilgrimage for him. He's a pilgrim in a sense, going to California to go to the filming locations of movies that he's loved. And I told him about Devil's Tower and Close Encounters movie. And so I carried this Kiowa Indian friend to Devil's Tower. He had never been, even though Devil's Tower is I want to say, a Kiowa directed mountain site. So, they're, I think, the most vitally connected to Devil's Tower. I could be wrong, but I believe the Kiowa are, because I see a lot of green colors in the prayer ties and prayer flags and things, and my Kiowa friend told me about it. So Scott Momaday would say, when he was a boy, his mother would say, when we were at Devil's Tower, and she had never got to go there, actually. So there are these locations that carry certain spiritual power. We see that in the Bible. Even Daniel, when he's in Babylon, he's praying towards Jerusalem, because Jerusalem is a location, a place of great power for him. And so people's attention are directed to certain localities because of spiritual power that's there. But when I began to drive my friend toward Devil's Tower, he had never been. He was a senior citizen Native American man. He's riding my truck. As soon as Devil's Tower came into his view, he started speaking in tongues because he's a Pentecostal. But he also began praying in Kiowa language. And it's very powerful for him to go sit on the bench around Devil's Tower. And of course, all the tourists were all gathered toward him. They all could pick up on and feel that he was a Native American elder that knew where he was and that it was special to him. So there, if you can visit the place, you can go and get grounded on the ground, be at ground zero, so to speak. Then the benefits for you are way greater. But if you can't do that, you can study after it, because there's some point, I believe that it's a point, it's a ground zero point at which God touches the earth. And these places are everywhere. They're all over the world. And so to ground your faith, or to ground your self-awareness, self-identity, by going to the place anytime you can. And I don't just mean, being a tourist. You don't even have to take a tour. You don't have to spend any money except getting there. Just be there. And the experiences that you'll have will not be something that you can process logically. This is a spiritual and emotional thing that happens to people. So the day I was in Macon, that day was a definitive day for me because it was me grounding my music. And so now, you know, being in Alabama, same thing, because there's a lot of music in my life that happened in Alabama. And so I pick up on it all around here. So that now, you know, it's just something that I know. And then when you go about your life as a person and you've been grounded in who you are and what you believe and what you love. So some people don't get out much. So I really appreciate guys like Rick Steves, who does a lot of travel writing, and then the Lonely Planet people are amazing. And all of that began, Rick Steves and then the Lonely Planet people, that all began on the hippie trail. And they got this stuff the way I'm describing right now. Transformation, pilgrimage, and transformation. So I hope that's helpful to somebody. And Macon is definitely a grounding point for me. You know, because it wasn't just the sounds of the Allman Brothers and the Big House, but it was Otis Redding in the Monterey Pop Festival, '67. These things, Aretha Franklin, Muscle Shoals with Dwayne Allman, and all that. Now this is a soundtrack, and of course, being a Georgia native, I carry it with me everywhere I go. But y'all have a blessed day. Take care.